I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome those of you who have been able to attend and contribute to this webinar, titled No More Justification. Time to End Israel's Crimes is Now. This significant webinar addresses the grave crimes being committed against civilians in Gaza. According to international reports, this webinar comes amid an unprecedented humanitarian crisis resulting from deliberate policies aimed at destroying the Palestinian population, constituting crimes against humanity and amounting to genocide. First of all, let me remind you of today's key points of discussion. The main key points. First, brutal tactics targeting civilians in Gaza, which includes the deliberate denial of access to water, electricity, and food, leading to thousands of deaths from dehydration and disease. Second, systematic destruction of vital infrastructure, including water networks, sanitation systems, and healthcare facilities. Three, the use of siege and starvation as tools of collective punishment against civilians. Number two is required international legal actions, which includes calling on the International Criminal Court, ICC, to issue arrest warrants for those responsible for these crimes. Two, using the International Court of Justice, ICJ, to take serious measures to halt the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Three, the role of the international community, which includes highlighting the urgent need to stop military and financial support to the occupying state, with a particular focus on the United States as a primary enabler through arms supplies and veto power. That obstructs the ceasefire efforts. Second, reviewing bilateral relations with countries that arm and support such brutal policies, ensuring accountability for their complicity in these crimes. Four, leveraging international reports. First, in this category, we are utilizing international reports as tools to pressure governments supporting the occupation, to exposing violations to global public opinion, to create a strong international movement against these crimes. And these were today's key points. And before we get started, I'd like just to introduce the guest speakers for today, Mr. Dr. Noah Schendlinger and Mr. Jeff Halper. And of course, when we start with one of our speakers, I will explain his title. And let me explain the title from now. Allow me also to explain the presentation format. Each speaker will have 4 to 5 minutes to present his testimony and insights. And after all the speakers have finished their presentation, if time permits, we will have a discussion session lasting no more than 20 minutes. During this session, speakers can add their thoughts and comments on other speakers' contributions. And at the end of the webinar, each speaker will have 1 minute to provide their final words and conclusion messages. Now, thank you very much for listening, and let's welcome to the floor the first speaker for today, Dr. Noah Schendlinger, Assistant Professor of Middle East History at the Department of History and Political Science at Worcester State University. Please.
Hi, hello everybody. So I actually want to point to something. The reason why I'm looking down is because I'm looking at today's news. And one of the news items that sort of caught my eye has to do with the Israeli weapons manufacturing. So as you know, really probably one of the most important exports that Israel has to do with what we call, security, the security industry. So that's surveillance and weapons. And today, just this morning, there was a bit of news in which the Israeli manufacturer of the Arrow missiles, those are the missiles that Israel is using to intercept, incoming ballistic missiles and so on. The manufacturer has received this mega contract for for air missiles. These missiles are going to be then purchased by the Israeli military, but also by Germany because of the perceived Russian threat and so on. So one of the things that we need to pay attention to and really track is the ways in which weapons manufacturers are reaping the benefits of Israel's genocide in Gaza and also regional wars, right? I mean, also Lebanon and Syria, and what we're seeing also these kind of attacks in Germany and in Yemen. And this is something that if we want to really shift, right, the politics um, around, Israel and around providing this kind of, diplomatic cover for Israel and so on, we actually need to speak to the um, kind of the prominence of weapons manufacturers, right? Israeli weapon manufacturers who are, then selling, right, the newest developments abroad, but also weapons manufacturers, for example, here in the US. I think um, as we kind of shift our advocacy and activism, we need to focus on those. Like, for example, in the US, the arms manufacturer lobby, which is very, very strong in Massachusetts, um, and really kind of target them, right, as kind of a node to talk about the complicity of, particularly Western governments, such as the US and the EU and the UK, right, in propping up, right, this regime in Israel, right? Local activists here are starting to understand this and sort of starting to shift, right, their particular tactics when it comes to activism. But I think it's something that needs to be foregrounded more, um, internationally, and talk about how Israel is, um, in fact, using its aggression in Lebanon and Syria and its genocide of the Palestinians, also in the West Bank, which has stepped up, in order to test, develop, and then market, right? It's weapons industry, right? This is something that I think broader audience would be able to understand. I don't know a lot of people in the kind of general public who are all for, um, you know, um, um, high tech, um, weapons that are meant to kill as many civilians as possible. So this is actually kind of a winnable in the long run. It's kind of a winnable battle that we should pay attention to, right? Weapons manufacturing.
Okay, are you done? We can hear Dr. Noah.
Yeah,
Yeah, please go on.
yeah. So I wanted to sort of highlight this today. Especially as I'm again going through the news and I'm seeing that Israel is also stepping up its assault using drones and other similar weapons in the West Bank. This morning, I think it was Tulkarm, but this is something that we've been seeing, in Jenin and in other places. So
Respect.
I do think that we should talk more about the weapons industry and its role in providing cover for Israel, right?
Let me ask you if I say that, do you think that this kind of escalation, and if we're talking about weapons, has anything to do with the current situation in Syria, and some you can say the word is kind of forgetting or turning his head away from Palestine.
I mean, I think it's all connected in the sense that Israel has been getting a lot of cover, right? I mean, think about Biden, right? They're like, yeah, sure, like they should, no problem. He has no problem with Israel, for example, occupying um, a significant Syrian territory, right? Because it's self-defense. And so, of course, Israel is sort of seeing this as kind of a carte blanche, right? To keep up its assaults regionally, but also on Palestinians in Palestine. So whether it's the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, and we need to pay attention to that, and we need to look at the ways in which these are all these areas are connected to one another.
Exactly, yes, I think it is connected. Yeah, the Middle East are all a field now for what's happening in Gaza, a reflection as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Noah Schindlinger, for your contribution. And now we will give the floor to Mr. Jeb Harper, former head of Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, ICAHD. Mr. Harper wants to discuss Trump's normalization push, exposing it as legitimizing apartheid, imposing an unviable Pakistan, and also on Palestinians. And I want to also to understand what is Pakistan and pressuring Saudi Arabia to resist joining. Please, Mr. Helper.
Thank you much, and thanks for inviting me. I'm very glad that Noah brought up this issue of weapons and Israel's use of Gaza and the entire Palestinian area as a laboratory for developing and exporting weapons, which explains to a large degree why it has the clout it does in the international community, because it's a part of what I call its security politics. It's made itself very useful as both an enforcer of global North economic and military political policies in the global South, and particularly in the Arab world, but also in terms of its ability to give technologies repression to repressive governments all over the world, and in that way garner a lot of support for its own policies. I wrote a book about this that's called War Against the People, Israel, the Palestinians, and Global Pacification. But I think and today, another deal that was signed, Israel signed a $600 million deal for air defense systems with the country of Slovakia. So, you can't underestimate, and it's good that Noah brought that up, this dimension as well. From my point of view, it brings up a key issue here, and that is that the Palestinians are absolutely irrelevant to Israel and to its entire Zionist enterprise. They're not considered a factor. Their existence as a national group, their rights, their well-being certainly are simply not factors. They're simply a kind of an object to be dealt with, and if possible, like in developing the weapons, an object that you can experiment on in order to develop better weapons of suppression, and in that way use them as a kind of a marketing tool. Also as a foil, terrorists and so on, as a foil to justify your policies. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind, because for Israel and much of the international community, the Palestinians are not really real. They're not really a people, a part of humanity that has rights. I think one of the representatives of the Palestinians in the UN, in the Security Council, said a few weeks ago, aren't we even human? I mean, this is part of the equation. In other words, it's not like, you can draw on sympathy for Palestinians, I think, more and more in the international community, but I don't think this is really a consideration among governments. And therefore, we have to understand that genocide is built into settler colonialism, which is what Zionism is. What propels Israel is the settler colonial aspiration of taking over Palestine, displacing its people, taking its lands, and transforming an Arab country into a Jewish country. This is the context that we always have to put, I think, everything inside of. No specific events, including the genocide in Gaza, stands by itself or simply happens in the course of events. It all follows a pattern of displacement and the takeover of Palestine, basically, so that genocide is then built into the Zionist settler colonial project. It was built into other settler colonial projects too. If you look at Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, and other places as well, both cultural and physical genocide. So that I think we have to understand in terms of this wider context. It's not a problem specific to Gaza, arising on October 7th that we have to deal with and end. It, as Noah says, it extends into the West Bank. It extends and extended into Israel itself with the Nakba in 1948. And it's a part and parcel of the Zionist movement, which means then that the only way out of this is to decolonize Zionism, decolonize the Israeli colonial enterprise regime, and in that way get to some better place that we don't have maybe time to talk about tonight. The problem we have, of course, is that we really don't have leverage. Human rights does not mean very much today in the international community. Now, as we're getting into Trump's, Trump is the epitome of transactionalism in international relations. There's no alliances, there's no values, there's no human rights, there's no rules-based international order. Everything is a deal. And in fact, he calls the Abraham Accords and the legitimizing of Israel's settler enterprise and the annexation of East Jerusalem to Israel the deal of the century. Everything is a deal. And therefore, our mechanisms of human rights, international law, the UN even, all the ICC, all these mechanisms really have no leverage. And I think we have to begin to think about other ways in which we have to respond to this. And of course, then we have to look at the timing of what happened in Gaza. Not only is genocide built into the Zionist enterprise, but we have to look at why now. Why all of a sudden this escalation, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And I think what we have to keep in mind at this moment is the normalization process that Trump began with the Abraham Accords and the end of his first administration. It's been continued by Biden. Only October 7th, the Hamas attack deflected and delayed the signing by Saudi Arabia onto a normalization agreement with Israel. And now Trump, of course, this is his prime priority right now, is to go back to the Abraham Accords, the jewel in the crown, the only missing piece, of course, being Saudi Arabia. That's indicated it's very willing to normalize with Israel. And normalization, I think, represents the greatest threat to the Palestinians since 1948, since the Nakba. Because normalization is not simply another stage in the process. That's how settler colonialism ends. It normalizes. And normalization is a closure. There is very little political space after normalization. Normalization means the Israeli apartheid regime has been recognized and legitimized. It means the settler enterprise has been accepted. It means that Palestinians are permanently locked into an apartheid state, an apartheid reality where they live on a Bantustan and stand on maybe 10 to 15% of historic Palestine. And it means with the normalization going through the Arab world, that this apartheid regime gets international legitimacy and it becomes permanent. And once it's normalized, it's normalized. There is no next stage. That is the end in a sense. And I think that's how Israel looks at it. So this is a tremendous challenge facing us in the next few months. Trump comes in January. This is all in place. Saudi Arabia has said it will normalize with Israel on condition, and you know what the condition is? That there's a pathway to a Palestinian state. That Israel promises that someday in the future, maybe it will consider the possibility of establishing a Palestinian state. That's the condition. So Saudi Arabia is going to go into this. I think it's going to complete this normalization process in a way. And one thing that's very interesting is that, I mean, it's very hard to mobilize people around normalization. It's such a dry, gray, academic kind of a term. And therefore, I think all our protest movements and our political movements are missing this because they're not connected to what's going on the ground politically. We all continue with our agendas, regardless of what's happening on the ground. And just to finish, I want to say, that this has to be the focus of our, and I think in terms of ending not only the genocide in Gaza, but the entire genocide, we have to oppose immediately the normalization process and then begin to work towards what does decolonization mean and what is a future political program, which Chaim and I at least think is one democratic state. What's missing here, and I'll end on this, is that there is no pressure that I know of. I mean, we're talking here about an Arab organization that's hosting this. I don't know, first of all, pressures in general on governments not to enter into the normalization process. But since we're talking about Arab governments, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, I mean, Jordan, Egypt, the Bahrain, Morocco, that just signed a whole drone deal with Israel this week as well. Egypt, where is the Arab Muslim voice in particular to come out in public and tell these Arab governments, no, you do not sign normalization? And, we can blame Israel. We can blame the United States. We can look at Trump and so on. But this will not happen unless the Arab governments are the ones that cooperate with it. And so there has to be a specific, I think, worldwide pressure put by Arab and Muslim communities the world over on these Arab governments not to normalize with Israel. That seems to me the major source of leverage that exists in order to prevent this.
Jeff, I just have one quick question for you. Actually, what I can understand from the escalation now in the West Bank and in Gaza as well, I mean the Strip as well, is that I can understand it in the context that Trump just turns a blind eye till he takes office, and then he can apply his plans, like saying, come on, do whatever you want to do, and then I will stop this when I come in office. Is that a probability?
Well, I think Trump plays a huge role here. Trump has given a deadline to Netanyahu. Netanyahu would keep this going forever if he could, for his own personal and political reasons. Trump, who's an isolationist, who does not want to inherit Gaza and so on, has said to Netanyahu, I want this ended before I'm inaugurated on January 20th. So Netanyahu has a deadline. So I think, yes, Trump does play a role in ending the genocide, getting to a ceasefire. I mean, who knows what will happen after that? I mean, then the Palestinians are left on their own. Nevertheless, I think it will happen. And they're talking now about a deal, about the hostages and everything, because of Trump's pressure. Afterwards, I think, otherwise, afterwards it becomes irrelevant. I think that's where the West Bank becomes more important politically than Gaza.
Thank you very much for your precious contribution and input. And now I think we should give the floor to Professor Haim Rashid, Professor of Film Studies at SOAS. Professor Haim, have the floor.
Thank you. I've written my talk to keep to the 5 minutes limit, so apologies for reading it. I address you on Christmas Eve, celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, who was born and died a Jew. now followed by more than 1 billion Christians. Even before this young Palestinian was born, he was in mortal danger. His parents, Mariam and Yusuf, smuggle him out of the way to Egypt to save him from the massacre of the innocents. On the way, they pass through Gaza, like other biblical characters, Abraham and Sarah, or the first Yusuf, Joseph the Dreamer, all finding safe haven in Egypt. Such haven was denied tens of thousands of Gaza children and more than 100,000 of older Palestinians, victims of the Israeli genocide. Life of Palestinians in the land was never safe since the start of the Western Zionist project. Like other Arab regimes, Egypt abandoned the Palestinians to Israeli barbarities, and I hope we speak more on that, and Jeff has introduced this. But they are not the only or the main betrayers of Palestine. The main partner in Israeli crimes is the global West. With few exceptions, the US empire and its appendages has supported, financed, and armed a century of crimes against Palestinians. It is without precedent, justification, or morality for so many white Western imperialists to actively disavow international law, abetting crimes against humanity with impudence and a repulsive sense of self-justification. Western elite and media have betrayed not just the Palestinians, but international law itself, undermining and emptying it of any meaning if it ever had any. That they did so, sowing death and destruction in the whole region, is not a sign of strength. The opposite is true. It marks the deep decline of the Western Empire and its servile vassal states. This decline is the reason, but also the result, of the commitment to spreading chaos in the global East and South, without shame, without restrictions, without self-consciousness. But Christmas is not the only monotheist monotheist religious festival this week. Jews are celebrating Hanukkah, marking the freeing of Palestine from Hellenic imperial rule more than 2 millennia ago. That today, many Jews are celebrating Hanukkah while at the same time supporting a terrifying genocide by so-called a Jewish state is a mark of the depravity and lies of organized Jewry support of Zionism. Such fervent and enthusiastic support is a criminal spectacle unknown in 2 millennia of Jewish history. Israeli Jews' support for genocide by 97% in a Tel Aviv University poll in March and April is an unpardonable blot on Jewish history. For Jews elsewhere to do so is even worse. But we wonder, should Jews be held to higher standards than Western governments? And I say, yes, they should. Jews suffered the worst genocide last century. They are personally involved. My own family was destroyed by the Nazis in Poland. My parents were the sole survivors of each of their families, surviving also Auschwitz. How can descendants of such people inflict genocide on others? Is it even possible to encompass such contradictory notions in the same brain? Both the West and Israel, as its willing agent of chaos, have marked themselves as acting outside humanity, indeed, as its enemies, suffering from a deep cognitive dissonance, a socio-political psychosis likely to bring their eventual downfall. For the rest of us, our deepest duty is to oppose, to record, and condemn this Western Israeli atrocity, and to save the Palestinians from its ravages. guaranteeing the peaceful, safe, and just future in Palestine, together with such Israelis like Jeff and myself and many others, not enough, who oppose Zionism and all its crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hayim, for these beautiful words about the situation now and how it really relates to history. And now we give the floor to Dr. Ibo Mandeza, Zimbabwean academic, author, and advisory council member of FPRI. Mr. Mandeza, Dr. Mandeza.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear very
Yes,
well.
thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation the second time, and I'm feel honored, and I'm most grateful that I'm able to participate in this conversation, especially since, as you are aware, I'm one of the regular commentators on the tragic developments in the Middle East, in particular, the genocide in Gaza. I'm also pleased that we're having this conversation at a time that I've become very concerned at the apparent amnesia about the continuing genocide in Gaza. The world seems to have become tired of reporting on this intensive and persistent genocide in Gaza. The news channels make just a passing remark if you go through, except for Al Jazeera, which has been consistent. And we have to thank them, really, for the persistence with which they have kept the Gaza story on the news. Secondly, I'm also concerned, as many others are, at the apparent lethargy on the part of the international community, which has largely been indifferent to South Africa's role at the International Court of Justice, ICJ, which made headlines almost a year ago. We'd expected a more intense follow-up to the efforts of South Africa last year. And I'm embarrassed that in Africa, only one country, Namibia, supported the South Africans. For the most of the continent, and including the AU itself, there's been absolute silence. It's most embarrassing. The notable exceptions in this regard are South Africa itself, in terms of the action at the ICJ, and more recently Ireland, which has recently recognized the Palestinian state, to the anger of the Zionist state, which has since withdrawn its embassy in Dublin. Now, I believe such actions as those of Ireland and South Africa should be magnified through such conversations, should be magnified in the media in an effort to highlight the continuing genocide in Gaza and the extent to which it appears almost evident that the Israeli state wants to eliminate Palestinians altogether. We should, as a world, be completely embarrassed at the complete disregard of the genocidal massacre of the Palestinians on the part of the Western countries who are directly complicit in this genocide, as we made clear, and the extent to which the Israelis continue almost with impunity is something that is disgraceful, especially on the part of the Western countries who continue, as the previous speakers have indicated, to arm the Israeli state. And therefore, in conclusion, what is to be done? How shall we keep the Gaza story alive in our various countries on the news waves? How can we begin to generate a coordinated global approach through which the massacre of Palestinians can best be translated into action, resolute action against Israel itself? What can be done to ensure that the Israeli impunity is addressed and arrested sooner rather than later? What can be done to ensure that we have the UN resolutions on Palestine, on the genocide in Gaza, observed by the Israeli state through specific measures against the Zionist state? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abel, because of this. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Abel, for your input. And now we move to the next speaker, Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss. He's Jewish anti-Zionist and spokesman for the worldwide religious group Neturei Karta. Rabbi Weiss, are you there?
Yes. Okay, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us and for your time. And we are really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First, with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. It's as always, it's for us a great honor and a privilege to be invited, especially to this distinguished August Forum, Arab Organization for Human Rights in Britain, where
Thank you very much.
hope that it will be a platform and that it will be a catalyst, that with the help of the Almighty, that there will be an immediate cessation, end of this brutal, people say inhumane, and we want to stress ungodly attack against the people of Gaza, Palestine, and against humanity, the world. It's an attack against the world. And let me explain. So with the help of the Almighty, they should be able to be concise. The Zionists, I believe, underlying their this brutal attack that everybody has been witnessing live with their own eyes, not only hearing from people, but witnessing the attacks, the murder, the just heartless murder and oppression of a beautiful whole nation, the Palestinian people. Everybody's witnessing, and yet it's not stopping. Now, we're not accusing, God forbid, the world of not feeling for the people of Gaza, because with God's help, us of the Jewish community have been around the world, and I'm myself in New York. We have been in the United Nations and have heard how so many nations of the world, the vast majority, I would say, of the nations of the world are opposed and have voiced their opposition to what is happening. But still in all, it's not stopping. And that has to be, to a certain degree, because the world is in a certain manner feels that they don't have the justifiable means of stopping this attack, because it is not as if somebody is standing in front of another person with a gun in their hands or a knife in their hands, and there are people standing on the side and they could stop them because they are looking at this one with the gun as a victim, as a villain, and the one who's on the other side as a villain, as a victim. In other words, the man with the gun is obviously, and he's just wildly wanting to kill, he's the villain. The one who's going to be killed is let's just say a child, is the victim. Everybody recognizes it, and many people would jump in and stop that. In our case, there is a deeper issue, and that is because the state of Israel, it even hurts me to use the word Israel in reference to this Zionist endeavor, the Zionist state of Israel. They have come into this field of slaughter as a participant in a complex conflict, as if we have a war, as if we have two people with some justifiable concerns, some justifiable underlying issues. The Zionists have two, I would call them, with God's help, nuclear weapons. The first is they waved the Bible and claimed that we are the real owners and people, the landlords. We were in the land, and the interlopers and the ones who have come as somebody who doesn't belong there, as squatters, is the Palestinian people. And they're waving the Bible, and they're turning to the Jewish holy people around the world. They use the Star of David, and they're saying this is Judaism, and the interlopers, these people, the squatters, are the Palestinians. That's the first weapon they're using. And the rabbis around the world consistently, from before the United Nations ratified the state, they stood up and they said, this is wrong. This is patently wrong. We as Jewish people deny and are clear in stating unambiguously that the state of Israel, the Zionist movement, is a political movement, a transformation from Judaism that was religion, that is 3,000 years of being subservient to God, that forbids us, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, of claiming, of having any sovereignty whatsoever. And we have been living in Palestine as loyal citizens, as we have been in other lands, under Arab and Muslim leadership, in tranquility. I'm not saying that there was times it wasn't perfect, but we lived under the protection of, in Palestine would be under the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years. We lived in complete harmony, and we helped each other. The difference of religion is totally not a war or a conflict that we have an ongoing conflict between religions. Judaism is a religion. Judaism means that we should serve God and be subservient and good citizens in all the countries we reside. We refuse to accept this new movement of Zionism, which is 140 years and a transformation to nationalism. That's why the chief rabbis of Palestine, which I won't get into all of them, but the ones that are to be notable, is in 1947, the chief Rabbi Sonnenfeld, before the United Nations, July 16th, 1947, before the state was ratified by the United Nations, said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was with the delegation in front of the United Nations delegation in Palestine. And this is the opinion that was shared and held by the Jewish community. When he passed on, you see the tens of thousands taking up other rabbis. This is when Netanyahu came to the White House to visit, then even President Obama, the Jewish communities in the tens of thousands, which is, again, the ones who are true to the religion around the world invariably state that Israel has no right to rule over any part of the Holy Land. Bibi Netanyahu and the state of Israel does not represent world Jewry. Judaism, the religion, is again subservience to God and forbidden to have an established national home, certainly not by killing and stealing. And the Jews who are under the occupation in Palestine for 76 years are being brutally beaten, subjected to the violence and to the oppression, assassination by the Zionists constantly, that we are seeing. And they are arrested because they refuse to serve in the mandatory military service. They are brutally beaten, as I say, and assassinated and tortured. This is a fact that we are having. So the first weapon they use is the falsification of a religion that causes the whole world to stand back and intimidated, because they say, well, this is a world's religious conflict. I don't want to be labeled anti-Semitic. We've just past the stage of that there's many people still alive from the Holocaust. As my grandparents were killed in the Holocaust, there's many people who they realized the world was silent when Jews were being killed, so they suffer now from this a little bit of a guilt feeling, which is there should be a guilt feeling when the world was silent and did not let Jews into their lands. So they feel now they don't want to be dragged into this quagmire. That is the first. But then the Zionists, to complete their nuclear weapon, their second weapon is that they attack everybody as being anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitic because if you're opposing Zionism, you're opposing Judaism and the Jewish people. This is very ironic because the Jewish people around the world who look like me, and I travel the world, thank God, we are distinctly recognized as Jews, and we are therefore equated and therefore pulled into this Zionist endeavor, because people around the world, when they take one look at me, they say, oh, some come over and they say, Shalom Aleichem, and we are in support of your state of Israel, because I'm Jewish. So they think that if you're Jewish, you're supporting and backing the state. And the more the religious, obviously, you even should be approached if you're a rabbi to give encouragement. Why? At the same time, there's the millions of people around the world who have humane feelings. They oppose this. And they say, how could you kill children? But they're frustrated, they can't do anything. But who will they attack? They see a Jew. The fact is that the Zionists, when they made the state, they weren't trying to hide who they were. Here you can see when David Ben-Gurion, reading the Declaration of Independence at this most momentous occasion, this historic moment, almost none of them are covering their heads, which is a Jewish requirement, part of the Jewish law, to show that we have a God above us. So you can see their blatant disregard of the Torah, of the Jewish law, what Judaism is. Yet, and they're using the Star of David, and to the world, they are equating themselves, they're calling themselves Israel, which is Jacob. So they're standing there telling the world, you can't oppose us because we are the Jewish state, and if you're opposing us, you're anti-Semitic. They are the personification of anti-Semitism. They are creating around the world a hate of the Jews. They are murdering people in the name of Jews and Judaism. And what is happening is the world is fearful of speaking up because they don't want to get involved in a conflict with God or with people of religions. So we have this critical responsibility as Jews who are around the world. Again, invariably, the ones who are true to Jewish religion, we want to clarify and to uncover to the world this farce, this con job, this duping of the world, that Zionism is not Judaism. It's a pure nationalism that's been concocted by a group of people who detested the religion and looked for ersatz Judaism, something that's a purely selfish, materialistic nationalist movement. And if, unfortunately, we are finding that they are being so successful in their drive to equating Zionism with Judaism, and that it's to be referred, if you oppose it, as anti-Semitism, that you in Britain and us in the United States, our students, tens of thousands of students, tens of thousands of Jewish students amongst the many, maybe millions of students around the world who are attempting, simply children who are always starting fresh minds, looking for the truth and standing up there. They're getting they're getting suspended from the schools. There are teachers who are also, many of them who take their lives in their hands, basically, and their jobs in their hands, certainly, are losing their tenure. And why? Because they're passing laws one after the other that it's anti-Semitic to stand up against a movement that is killing, oppressing children and Jews in Palestine, and people who, it's an insult to basic sense, to basic logic, to basic intelligence, common sense, everything that, and basic decency that God gave us. It's an insult. How could they dare say that when you're killing people day after day for over a year now, and what they're doing, and they're oppressing together with them the Jews, and then to say that if you're anti-Semitic to do it, yet they're successful. They're successful in this attack. So we dare not be silent. We must plead with the world leaders that you, just as you would respect the Pope and the priest, and you will respect Muslim leaders, why aren't you respecting the Jews who have a continuity of the hundreds of and thousands of years, literally, that we are following the Torah teachings to the utmost? These rabbis are clearly showing you the documentation and the facts that Judaism is not Zionism, and that what
Thank
the
you very much,
Zionists are
Rabbi.
doing, right? Let me just finish this. And what Zionists are doing are one thing: it's criminal, it's illegal, and it's anti-Semitic. It's not justifiable. What people call human rights, what we call godliness. We plead for the people of Gaza. We plead for the people of Palestine. We plead for the leaders that they should step up to the plate with the gift they were given by God, their lofty positions, and do not have regrets 30 years down the line, when you'll be answering, like for the Holocaust they had to answer, that they'll have to answer to God and to their grandchildren what's happening here. Speak up, do up, and you will be
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi Weiss. We are really, personally, I'm really touched by your really heartful speech, and I feel that there's something really appreciated by even non-Jews. Thank you, Rabbi Weiss. And now we give the floor to Ms. Sonia van den Ende. She's a Dutch journalist and political activist. Sonia, are you there?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Hello. Sorry
Well,
for keeping you waiting for that long.
problem. Good
That's
evening from Moscow,
really
Russia. Yeah, from the other world, we can say, the other world as from the West on this Christmas Eve. First of all, I would like to say that I feel very sad and very sorry about what is happening in Gaza for more than 1 year already. And it is really, really terrible. We all know that. And we in the age of internet now, so we can see how the Israeli army is carrying out literally a genocide against the people of Gaza. The goal, as we see, is to starve the civilian population, destroy residential buildings, deliberately hitting civilians, but also the schools. Well, the civilian infrastructure has been hit, and this is really bad. It's not a real war, it's a war against the people. And I call it extermination of the civil society. The Israeli regime that has committed so many war crimes that it's really, I think, the war crimes are mounting up, and we didn't see that as till the end of the Second World War, what is happening now. And the goal of this, what I call a fascist government, a Zionist fascist government, is to exterminate, expel the Palestinians so that they can take over all the land of Palestine. I mean, their plan is to create a greater Israel. We see this happening. Also, they took parts now of Lebanon, Syria, and they will not give it back. We know that. And this is according to the Yinon plan. And yeah, more, we see that there was a case in Den Haag in Netherlands against Israel from South Africa in 2022. I mean, they took the lead in that and they won the case, but Israel does not care, unfortunately. I have to say, and I emphasize this all the time, that the international organizations like the ICJ, the ICC, unfortunately, they're all in Den Haag, in the Netherlands, where Netanyahu was convicted for war crimes and others, they have no influence anymore. They are Western-oriented organizations. Also, the UN, we see time and time again that when there is a resolution to be passed that America is putting in their veto. And as long as this exists, there will be no action from Western states and the killing will continue. And Israel will never, ever be convicted in Den Haag for its war crimes because the West is supporting Israel, and we know that. So I think that the solution should be sought in the new world, as I call it. I mean, living in Russia, I see the new world emerging, the multipolar world. The BRICS countries, like South Africa, is part of the BRICS, like Brazil and other countries are applying. And I think there is the opportunity in politics to have somehow a condemnation, have somehow maybe to start talks again, to start at least, negotiate a ceasefire. Of course, what other people said there, we need to get the Arab countries there, also Turkey. I think Turkey is a very good country when it stands for Palestine. So I think these countries should take a lot of pressure on Israel. And the West, unfortunately, lost its credibility because the Oslo peace plan. It's all, not implemented. So there's no hope. And well, they continuously, like what the other lady said, the weapons to Israel. Germany and America supply most of the weapons that kill the Palestinians at the moment. Also, unfortunately, my country, the Netherlands, supplies parts for F-35s. There was a lawsuit, but okay, they couldn't care less. This is, how they work. So personally, I think that the entire West should be also held responsible for the genocide in Gaza. And of course, the arms supply to Israel should stop, but I have no hope at the moment. But what I said, the other world should try and negotiate something. I mean, it's funny that I speak from the other world. I am in the other world now, and I see how the Western world is like hypocrite when it comes to Israel, also about Russia, but that's a totally different story. And also, I think that Israel should be sanctioned by the total international community because this is what the West is doing to other countries. And they should be completely isolated. I know this is a utopia. And yeah, I think that also another part is during my time at the International Atomic Energy Agency, I know that Israel is one of the countries who never gave up their possession of atomic weapons. And we don't know until today what they have. I mean, we know Dimona, this nuclear research facility there, and most likely nuclear weapons as well. So you see, what I'm trying to say is these international organizations don't have no use for that. And I think we as journalists, as politicians, but also citizens, we can do and try and collect a lot of evidence as much as possible, because let's hope, and maybe this is my hope, that in the future, maybe we can give all these evidence to somehow a trial. I don't think it will be in the West. Maybe it's in the Arab world, maybe it's in Africa or the global South, as it's called these days. And I mean, because we are not getting to the ground of Gaza because so many journalists are killed that it's very, very terrible. So we cannot be physically present there. Hundreds of journalists have been killed right now. So the evidence should be collected. This is what I say. And personally, I have given up, sorry, the West for making peace. We see too many conflicts. We see now Syria, we see now Lebanon. I mean, they destroy everything there, and this is very, very terrible. And also, we see new president-elect Trump from the US will come. Well, I think he will escalate a lot because we know he's a Zionist. He likes colonialism. He doesn't care about people. Some people said that already. So he's a big Zionist, and he will try together with Netanyahu. This is another part, maybe to tear down the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Nobody knows, to build a new temple. It sounds a conspiracy, but a lot of things we said that is a conspiracy, unfortunately, came true. So this is not a secret anymore, all these things. So yeah, I keep on saying, gather the evidence, and hopefully one day there will be some justice for the Palestinian people. And on this Christmas Eve, I can only say, yeah, this is not a Christmas of peace, and this is a Christmas of war. And not only there, it's half the world is in war. And yeah, things look very bleak at the moment. And I'm sorry I cannot give a more positive statement, but well, let's hope and pray this will end. And yeah, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for your contribution. And now, since all the speakers have finished their presentations, I think we have time now to open a discussion session about 20 minutes or less. During this session, speakers, if they can add their thoughts and comments and insight on other speakers' contributions. So whoever wants to start, you can go ahead.
Well,
Okay.
Noah, go ahead.
No, Jeff, go.
Who is
I was
going to
actually gonna just combine you, Noah, with what Sonia just said. So let me make that, and then we can.
Okay,
And
please go ahead.
that is this whole idea of weapons. First of all, I want to say I want to acknowledge the genocide in Gaza. We're talking politics, and politics can be very cold and calculated and so on. I mean, I don't want to say, or I don't want my remarks to take away at all from my thoughts of the genocide happening in Gaza. But having said that, I just want to say that I mean the weapons, the idea that Gaza is a laboratory for new weapons and technologies is really key here, because and this relates to what Sony was saying, this isn't only the West that supports Israel. I mean, the great alternative we had all hoped for to the global West, to the global North, was the BRICS countries. The BRICS and the global South. Well, it turns out that Israel, because of its arms capacities, has very good relations with all the BRICS countries. This goes beyond the West. Israel is the #2 arms supplier to China. And if we haven't noticed, China has been very quiet on this whole issue. Israel is the #2 arms supporter to India, arms supplier to India after Russia. India loves Zionism. Modi is Netanyahu's best friend. Israel has stayed out of the Ukrainian issue because it wants to keep good relations with Russia. Russia has always been very friendly to Israel. Putin and Netanyahu have a good relationship. Israel does supply military technologies to Russia as well. And you can go down the list of the BRICS countries, except for South Africa. I mean, now Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt have all joined BRICS. So Israel really has this kind of unique position in the world that we really have to deal with, and that is that it straddles East and West, global North, global South, G7, BRICS, and it has a lot of clout in all of those blocks. And so that's what makes it very difficult. It isn't like you can get China and Russia to oppose the United States and NATO in terms of Israel and Gaza. No, they're all fairly much on the same page with this. You don't see anybody standing up for Palestinian rights except South Africa and a few countries in the global South and the peoples of the world, not the governments. And so that's, I think, something we have to put into the equation.
Well, if I
Thank
may
you very
answer
much.
on, sorry, if I may answer
Uh,
on that, you are right to a certain extent. The situation, I can speak from Russia now. The situation about Palestine from the Russian government has changed a lot because I'm living here in a country with so many sanctions. I think the most sanctioned country in the world right now. And if you follow the UN, you can follow the conversation between the US ambassador and the Russian ambassador. And the Russian ambassador is speaking up. There are a lot of rabbis left already here in Russia because they call Putin now an anti-Semite, of course. This is the normal talk, we know that. But I think it changed. It really changed. And this comes because of what we have here, the war, the special operation, however you want to call it. This is why it has changed. And the Palestinian president will join in May here. So, I mean, he's been here a lot of times. So I think Russia has changed. I have been an observer for 2.5 years now. And this is what I can say and what I can report to you. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Sonia. I think Dr. Noah and Dr. Haim, Professor Haim as well, both are raising hands. So who wants to take the floor first? Dr. Noah, Professor Haim,
Uh,
who wants to
no,
start?
I said Noah was first.
Okay, because I bet. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. You mentioned Saudi Arabia, right? And the Emirates and Arab governments. Those are all, of course, dictatorships, right? Arab dictatorships, fascist dictatorships like Egypt. But you know what? We don't know. It's still early, but we don't know how the victory of the Syrian revolution actually would change kind of the way that even these governments behave, because this victory of the revolution, it demonstrates, right, how even a very powerful regime that had all of these allies, right, propping it up for so long, collapsed. And it collapsed with the, popular uprising. It took forever, but popular uprising, right? Um, and remember that in the 50s, the kind of the mantra was the road to Palestine goes Amman and all of that, right? So the idea is that a revolution, in order for a revolution from Palestine, decolonization of Palestine to work, it actually goes through all of those other Arab regimes. And I think that potentially resonates today. I wonder, right, what is going to happen, how that is going to evolve regionally. I'm kind of a cautious optimist on that. And I do want to just say something to Rabbi Sruel, is a Freilich Hanukkah, first of all, but the other thing is, Jewish
I think
identities.
this was Happy Hanukkah.
Yes, in Yiddish, sorry. And it
Okay.
goes to something that I, also,
Oh, you both understand.
yeah.
Okay.
Jewish identities is something that, evolved. And unfortunately, Judaism has been kind of abducted, right, by Zionism. But something that myself and other Jews in the diaspora, but also not just in the diaspora, sort of understand is that in order to save Judaism, from the clutches of nationalism, right, and militarism, actually the at least partial answer for that is to kind of re-embrace diasporism, right? Which is why I started learning Yiddish last December. Sort of really try to understand the more deeper history of Jews, right? That is completely separate from Zionism, right? And I think I'm seeing kind of a surge of that, at least in the US. I'm seeing more younger Jews learning Yiddish and sort of embracing this. So we do have a little bit of again, cautious optimism there, like unlearning nationalism.
I understand. Yeah, hopefully. Now, Professor Haim, please.
Yeah, I want to relate 2 points quickly. I agree with Noah that things are not set in stone. All of us remember that the Soviet Union fell before anybody understood what is happening. If the Soviet Union could disintegrate without any Sovietologists warning us that this is coming, and we've seen Syria, a small example of that, then things are not set in stones. First of all, I don't agree with you, Noah, that this was a popular uprising. I don't think it was. At the end of it, we see actually the United States, Israel, and Turkey, in other words, NATO-stan, all the actors of NATO, even though Israel is not in NATO, it's more important than many NATO countries for NATO. And of course, HTS, which is an ex-terrorist organization. If those are the popular uprising forces, then I'm not with them. So even now in Syria, we don't know what will happen. We don't know what will happen in Egypt. The Arab Spring is unfinished business. Anyone that thinks that this is finished, democracy in the Arab world is finished, is wrong. This is still developing and to be announced. So that's the first point. The second point is there is nothing Jewish about Israel. Rabbi Israel Weiss is totally right. There is nothing Jewish about its behavior. There is nothing Jewish about its politics. There is nothing Jewish about people's behavior to each other. And if they are behaving to the Palestinians like they do for 76 years, I'm not surprised that they behave to other Jews in the same manner. So the first thing to do is to defeat Zionism. And Zionism helps us because it is actually falling apart as we speak. Now, I'm not saying this is next week or next year, but Zionism will help us in taking itself apart. And this is why I mentioned the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was not attacked from outside. It wasn't even attacked by a popular revolt. It fell apart because it couldn't stick together, because its citizens didn't want that system. And I think many, many Israelis now have left Israel. People who want peace with Palestine have left Israel. This is ironic, but it's true. More than 500,000 Israelis left since the 7th of October, and they keep leaving. Jews are not going to come to Israel in great numbers because Israel is not a place where Jewish life is safe. Why? Because of Zionism. So I don't think that we should, be confused by orders from China or from India. I cover this in my latest book about the IDF. I have a chapter, two chapters actually, on this. So yes, these things will happen, but a lot of countries have withdrawn their orders for arms. So things are now in a flux. Syria is actually a good reason why they are in a flux, but they're not going one way. They're going more than one way. BRICS, I totally agree with Sonia. The future is with BRICS, not with the West. And to end, I want to say this. In 1973, the whole international community got so fed up with the racism of South Africa and with apartheid that they sat in the General Assembly of the UN and said South Africa should not be a member of the General Assembly of the UN. You're out. You're out of the UN. And this was not, the General Council. Yeah, this was sorry, the Security Council. This was a General Assembly. In other words, all the members voted, and there was a huge majority to kick South Africa, apartheid South Africa, out. If we consider the reasons they had to kick South Africa out, then they look like a joke compared to what Israel is doing to Palestine for 76 years and in the last 15 months. So the General Assembly should be able to kick Israel out of the UN. That will be an important move. And I think BRICS should support this. And the other thing I want to say is to rebuild Gaza is going to take 80 years, according to the UN. Where are Palestinians going? Even if the Israelis stop shooting and killing and genociding tomorrow, where are Palestinians going to live? Where? There is no place in Gaza that they can actually sustain life. Water medication, housing. So the Palestinians should not be sent to Canada or to Congo or to the moon, like some people are trying to do or to argue for. The Palestinians should be put into Palestine with the protection force of the UN.
Yeah, I agree, 100% agree with you. And also, we have now Rabbi Israel David Weiss. He has something to say to us. Please, Rabbi. Hello?
Rabbi, you are muted. Could you please unmute yourself?
Hello? Rabbi Weiss? Yeah, can you just unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
Right. Okay, am I unmuted? Yes, am
Yeah,
I
that's right.
unmuted?
We can
Yeah.
hear you now. Yeah,
Yes.
please.
So with the help of the Almighty, again, we have to the right words is we plead for, because it's these sessions are so short, and we were trying to accomplish so much. But just as to point out, Jews have been living together before Zionism. As all, I want to thank, Noah and all everybody has been so, eloquently mentioned. This is so clear. It's just this a political movement that has destroyed everything, and that is really presenting itself to the world as a proper entity, and therefore it's like that is their shield. Now, in fact, if I mentioned the word shield, and they mentioned Hanukkah, as you meant, it is our holiday Hanukkah coming up in 2 days, and the Zionists, as you know, have an Olympic team they call the Maccabees. And they show all the signs, the Maccabee with a sword, and that's one of their signs, one of their, besides raising the Israeli flag, they have the Maccabees with a shield, with a sword. Now, just to show how the falsification is here, the Maccabees were when the Greeks put out a decree on the Jews that they can't keep the Sabbath, that's from the Ten Commandments, that and other to circumcision and whatever, the other laws. Now, they at the punishable by death. Now, with the Maccabees were five children of the high priest. They were old men, basically, most probably. They came up and they fought against an army that was hundreds of thousands, and they were only successful because it was God behind this issue. It was a miracle. So the Zionists always are misconstruing, and they went up to stand against the attempt to obliterate Judaism that was supported by people like the Zionists that were non-religious, who were trying to change the religion from within, to drop the religion. So ironically, the Zionists are the same, like they called the Misyabnim. Yavan is the Greeks. They were the ones, the Jews who were trying to obliterate the Torah, were working with, and it was these 5 old men who fought against them. And it wasn't because the power of guns and force that they were able to be victorious. It was because God backed them. Saying that, what I'm trying to say is they're using the Maccabees as a false narrative of what Judaism is. Judaism is to serve God, and that were forbidden to kill. And it wasn't because the power of these world powers that we were able to be victorious. It was because God saved us. In the case of Zionism, I'm saying, even though the world powers and Sanya and whatever other people said, different than no, they said, they mentioned like that we, like the world powers, we pick up our hands and defeat almost from them, because we can't do anything. But if you look at South Africa, I was just before mentioned, South Africa, we believe it's through God that everything happens. But on the earth, something you have to, the actions that were taken was the grassroots that just didn't let the governments at peace. They badgered the politicians till they had no choice. But even though the United Nations for tens of years were giving credence and respect to South Africa's apartheid government, and Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years, it was the grassroots that finally made their politicians stop supporting the apartheid, and it was totally wiped out. Today, if you will try to make an apartheid state, they will be laughed out of the United Nations. As it was mentioned before, just before so eloquently, Israel is 20 times, 1,000 times worse than that, and it has to be totally removed, because it should be a free Palestine. Now, this will happen, because God says, while you're rebelling against me, it will not be successful, and so is in the Torah. So we are urging everybody, and so Noah mentioned that, to go back to the old Judaism. Judaism is this it's one thing only, that we made a covenant with God on Mount Sinai to be subservient, to recognize He created the world, and He is the ruler of the world, and keeping the Sabbath, 6 days He created the world, 7th He rested. That is what that is. That is what Judaism is, and Judaism states that we're not allowed to kill or steal, that we are to show a gratitude for people who did to us kindness, for the Arabs and Muslim people who took us in, not to vilify them, and because of your convenience that you're going to, with a stroke of the pen, say that all the Muslims hate the Jews. That's the opposite of gratitude that we have to show for the Muslim countries that took us in by the Crusades and Inquisition. So the Zionists, their enterprise, they're making the state is totally contradictory to Jews not to have a state, and but the grassroots, we will stand up, the grassroots, and constantly insist that our politicians recognize that they're supporting something illegitimate, because it's not a legitimate reason to occupy land. The reason they're saying is because it's theirs, it's not theirs, and they're killing and stealing to do it. We can, if as a grassroots people around the world, stand up and put final pressure on the governments that you mentioned, like the General Assembly should ultimately put them out. Why? Because at the end of the day, there's a God behind this world, and it could stop today. It could end today. But again, the grassroots should not lose their hope and their ambition to stop it, because even though it may look hopeless, just like there was a Greek empire, Roman empire, there was other empires that were so powerful, but overnight these things ended. We will continue to do and to disclose the contradiction between Judaism, that means subservience to God, upholding the Torah, Maccabees, serving God, that's what it was, and not what the Zionists portray it, an occupation with a sword. We will reveal to the world that what they're supporting with, and like you say, documenting, the Sandra said, they're documenting all these, every single act of what they're doing, that the world will eventually have the power over the powers that are in place now. In other words, the grassroots in Russia, the grassroots in the United States, around the world, besides the good governments, all these good governments that are standing up to the plate, we will be successful. Why? Again, I hope I'm speaking to believers, because there's a God behind us. He will bring an end to this injustice, but we should not be intimidated. We have to speak up and do. We just was now at the demonstration. It was one of the rabbis, his name is Rabbi Moshe Everon. He's as you see, the Zionist police simply arrested him, as the tens of thousands of others. He's in prison years. He has a large family. We've been demonstrating because why? Because he's standing up against Zionism. He has not committed one single, he's not a violent man, no guns, he's in prison. We want the world to stand up and I'm asking you to bring also to publish constantly actions, what they're doing to the Jews. So the world should wake up and say, wait, if that's just the Palestinians, they're terrorists, why are they doing it to the Jews? Bring out these stories. Bring out the stories with put for money. Collect money, put it into advertisements in newspapers that they should see the crimes that they're doing to the Palestinians. The newspapers don't print it because they're afraid to print it. But if you do it as an advertisement, they have to sometimes put it in. You can fight them. We fought the New York Times, and they eventually had to put in some of our messages. They'll have to. You get the message out that the grassroots, that the people of the world will understand they're being duped, and they're supporting a mass murder, a genocide in Palestine, and then the world together will eventually, with God's help, bring a change in the United Nations, and maybe we'll have, inshallah, free Palestine.
Inshallah. Yeah. I believe in this very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi Weiss, for your precious words, and which gives us hope that there's going to be more just days for this area, inshallah, as you said. Doctor, now we have to, I think we bring it to a close, but Dr. Ebo Mandaza, do you have a last word to share with us, or?
Yes, thank you. Just two,
Please.
3 points. The first one, follow up on the. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear. Go ahead.
I want to follow up on the previous speaker, the one before the last, particularly in his elucidation of the nature of Zionism as distinct from Judaism and Jews. I think it's a very important point that he made. But more important was the implication, which I share, but what's going on in the Middle East, what's happening in Gaza, that the whole nature and content of the Zionist state is given to the demise of itself. That is very clear. You cannot do what you have done and get away with it. It's something that nobody, no state in the world can survive this kind of genocide. There will be implications, and there have to be implications, and it must lead to the end of Zionism. The second point I want to raise is really, we need to make a careful comparison between Zionism and apartheid South Africa. Under what circumstances and conditions did the world turn against apartheid South Africa? This is very important. I think the point is made, while it is true that the grassroots in South Africa, the African states themselves, the frontline states of Southern Africa, were important factors, there is no doubt that the global anti-apartheid movement was a major factor. And it is that kind of mobilization that we want with respect to the Palestinian question. How can we build that momentum, that coordinated effort to isolate the Zionist state globally, to bring pressure on them in the UN, as was done in the case of apartheid South Africa? Lastly, I was alarmed at the reference to BRICS, and I think it's true. BRICS has not been as assertive or coordinated in its anti-Zionism as we expect them to be. And I think it is right and proper that we should request and put pressure on BRICS as the main platform through which we can fight the Zionist state and bring to bear a process through which we can see a Palestinian state sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ivo. And at the end of this webinar, so we can just have from each speaker something like final words in less than a minute. Does anyone wants to wrap up with something?
No, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm done, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Rabbi Weiss, you have 60 seconds. Yeah, can you unmute yourself again?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
okay.
again, pray to the body to give us these words. So for the Jewish people around the world, I hope that the message, they should step out of the comfort zone and they should ask the question, why is it that the very religious communities who give their lives for their religion They pay for the private education and so forth, whether it's in Mea Shearim, in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem, or in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The ones who really give their lives for if it would be critical to support the state, if it's something good for Judaism, they would be the first to support it. They should ask this question. And non-Jews should also, when they're questioned, how come you're anti-Semitic? They should say, why is it that the very religious Jewish communities in Williamsburg, there's not one Israeli flag, in Mea Shearim, there's not one. And the ones who want to embrace what's right from the Jewish people, I urge them, not only Yiddish, and I thank Noah for that, but they should accept what it means Jew, to accept the laws of the Torah, and automatically you would have to be against the occupation. For the people of the world, again, remember, you would respect another religious authorities. Remember that anti-Semitism ask the Jewish authorities from the very religious communities why they are anti-Zionist, and they'll tell you that Zionism is Zionist. And for the people of Gaza, please, we are
understand.
hurting with you, that God will help. We urge everybody to pray. They should pray to God, because ultimately He will bring the result, that you should bring a free Palestine, and let us all work and do for it.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. Jeff, do you have something to add?
Well, I think we got a little bit far away from the Palestinians and genocide, and got more into Judaism, and in fact, this is the second settler colonial movement in Palestine, because in the book of Joshua, God, this famous God of ours, ordered Joshua and the Israelites to commit genocide against the Canaanites. So to keep God out of this, as if he's innocent or he's on the side of justice, for me is a theological problem, but I'm not going to get into that. I want to just end by saying my heart and my thoughts
please,
of all of us are with the people of Gaza in this time of genocide, and with the people, I think, of the West Bank as well.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Noah, you have something to add?
Just that to kind of, again, bring the conversation back to Palestinians, right? Is one of the other things, is that the conversations in the media, in public events, often have been in the absence of Palestinians. And one of the things that we need to make sure in the circles that we're in events that we take part of, that there would be more Palestinian voices, right? And not speaking over Palestinians, right?
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much.
So let me
Sonia,
say,
do you have a final?
just let me say one thing. Am I unmuted?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying that
10 seconds.
We are giving our lives. We are going day and night on the streets of New York, in London. Our hearts, and we are crying and hurting with the people of Palestine and Gaza. We personally were in Gaza. So do not think that we are minimizing. On the contrary, because we believe there's a God in the world, and He demands of us to be compassionate, and to think we are hurting with the people of Gaza, and because of that, we are hopeful that there will be a free Palestine. We will not be silent for the people of Gaza and Palestine, and God will help. And we ask you, don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated too, and we'll get help. God help a free Palestine in our days. Thank you.
Okay. Sonia, do you have a final word?
Just a final word. I have lived a long time in Syria, so I speak Arabic. I know the Arabic world. I was in Palestine reporting there before the war. So I hope there will be more understanding between the Western world, but also the US, that's part of the Western world, and the Arab world. And then we maybe understand more from each other, and maybe we can pressure the governments more to really have peace. And Arab people are just like Western people. They are very good people. We are on one level, and inshallah, hopefully there will be some peace.
Inshallah. That's something we all agree about, is inshallah. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for this valuable webinar. And I'd like to thank everyone who has taken part, either by commenting, speaking, or even listening. And thank you for your precious time. And until we meet again, have a very good day.
Bye all. Thank you much. Thank you, Nada.
Thank you.